1. Because there is nothing inherently isolationist or inward-looking about choosing to elect your own government. 2. Because if Labour or any of the other unionist parties were really serious about wanting to see more devolution within the UK, they wouldn't have united to remove this option from the ballot paper. 3. Because people say there are more artists voting yes because artists tend towards imagination, hope and possibility rather than a kind of level-headed, rational pragmatism. Because that's supposed to mean we don't really know what we're talking about. Not like proper grown-ups, but I say if the outcome of this so-called pragmatism of yours is the brutalising logic of failed austerity, then maybe it's time to listen to the artists. 4. Because we're not going anywhere. 5. Because sure, I like David Bowie, but not that much. 6. Because the radical independence conferences have been the biggest, most hopeful, most active gatherings of the organised and unaffiliated left in Scotland in my lifetime. 7. Because the NHS is important. Because defending working class gains of all kinds is vital and urgent. Independence should be viewed as a first act of defence against the relentless advance of 21st century neoliberalism. 8. Because solidarity with the rest of the UK does not necessitate outsourcing democracy. There will be many who tell you that independence amounts to us turning our backs on the rest of the UK, that it is selfish, that it is an act of abandonment, that there is more that unites us than divides us, that ordinary people in Edinburgh have more in common with ordinary people in Liverpool than we do with the Duke of Buccleuch. And they're right. And we also have more in common with ordinary people in Dublin, Madrid, Chicago, Malmo, Auckland than we do with the Duke of Rothesay or Argyll or the Duke of practically fucking anywhere for that matter. Because what kind of genuine internationalism can be based upon the idea that the people you have most in common with are those you share a border with? There is nothing about solidarity that demands lasting political union. There is a better way for us to be neighbours and it's within our reach. 9. Because what's so precious about a centuries-old, undemocratic political agreement made in the interests of empire, capital and war anyway? 10. Because I'm not a nationalist. Okay, here's an anecdote about Basque anarchists. In this anarchist community, there was a clear division on the issue of Basque separatism. One large faction simply could not fathom why their comrades were willing to ally themselves to the cause of nationalism, the idea of a nation-state being in their minds inherently oppressive and utterly contrary to their no borders ethos. The other group explained that they were siding with the Basque separatists because it represented a clear material stepping stone towards localising democracy and reforming the political system to better empower communities, and also because any attempt to maintain and preserve the imperialist, capitalist, monarchist Spanish state in its current form has to be viewed with the utmost suspicion. This describes my feelings towards Scottish independence and the British state almost exactly. 11, because I'm uncomfortable with using the word evil, but if there is one place it can probably be accurately applied, it is in describing weapons of mass destruction. Because justifying their existence anywhere and on any terms is disgusting. But justifying keeping them an hour's drive from my flat because it is suitably remote is nothing short of a personal insult. 12, because so much of the worst of what has been inflicted on people in Scotland has been done so by governments that they did not vote for. Someone explain to me how this is okay again. Someone please explain to me how, even in the hyper-accelerated idiocy of the current state of global affairs, this is to be considered normal and right in a so-called democracy. 13, because if it does lead to more autonomy for Shetland and for Orkney, then I say that's a good thing, because localising democracy is a great thing to do. 14, because I'm not a patriot. Because there's nothing about the accident of birth of being Scottish that I can think I can be particularly proud of. We're not somehow better than people who are born in or who live in any other geographically and politically defined population of people. But for fuck's sake, we're not any worse either. 15, because it might just be the best thing to ever happen to the English left. Because what are the alternatives here? Reform Labour so that it functions as a genuine party of socialism? Seriously consider the chances of that. Honestly, weigh that up for just 1 minute. The current system serves no one well. allowing a complacent Labour Party to continually capitulate to a Tory agenda in order to win votes in England in the belief that its Scottish votes are safe. As one Londoner friend recently said to me, let's face it, something has to shift, right? 16, because climate change is so urgent that any opportunity we might have of voting in a government that might even remotely take this fact seriously should basically outweigh everything else on its own. 17, because you need to take a long, hard look at yourself if you think that carrying a different passport from someone is a barrier to your closeness. 18, because we're not drawing a new border, it's already there. Okay, so ideally we wouldn't have borders at all, maybe. Borders might be inherently oppressive. Nation states are not really a mode of organising that I'm particularly gung-ho about, to be perfectly honest. But the choice we make in September is not between independence and a kind of no-borders internationalism. It's between an increasingly isolationist British state which is out of step with feeling in Scotland, and which in all the main parties adopt a line on immigration that is a response on some level to an agenda being forced by racists in UKIP. 19, because if you pick up the white paper and turn to page 271 in the section on immigration policy, you will find these words: in an independent Scotland we will close Dungavel. 20. Because fuck the Tory party. There, I said it. Because the thought of David Cameron crying into his cornflakes makes me happy. Because it would have made Thatcher furious. Because all the hereditary landowning peers in the House of Lords can go to hell. This might sound like childish and petulant reasoning, but it's not. When a political system has alienated you and the people around you so thoroughly, then wanting to rip it up and start it again is a perfectly reasonable response. The super rich are voting no, and that should tell us something about whose interests this union serves. Hit the reset button, folks. The game has crashed. 21, because roch the wind in the clear day's dawning, blaws the clouds east of Druidy or the bay, but there's mair nor a roch wind blowing through the great glen of the world today. 22, because Lord George Robertson says it would be the collapse of the Western world. He's wrong, of course. But looking at his priorities as an imperialist capitalist lord that served NATO, if he were right, I can't help but think I'd possibly even be quite pleased. 23, because UK politics is trapped inside its own sense of helplessness. We have a task of engaging in massive democratic renewal at a time of deep political scepticism. It's exciting. For the first time in my life, it's actually exciting. 24, because nothing of what I've said here is idealistic pie in the sky. Because everything I've said here is based on real material possibility. Of course nothing is given. Of course it all needs to be fought for. Of course a mere constitutional shift, however major, is not going to bring about the answers in and of itself. Not all of the stuff that I hope independence can help bring about will be brought about. But some of it will, if we're willing to work for it. Yes, it'll be messy, uncertain, at times compromised, even ugly. But isn't that how the status quo feels anyway? For the first time in possibly all of our lives, there's an actual rational chance of implementing the changes we might want to see. An opportunity that frankly isn't there in the current setup. There are no guarantees. The future is always an unknown quantity. And yes, unionists will tell us that there is no magic porridge pot, as John McTernan recently did in typically derisive, belittling fashion. But to build even a marginally better society, we don't need a magic porridge pot when we have the democratically enabled will of the people. Which brings me to my final point, 25, because I am a realist.